Hello, we are back with All In 2025 with Cassandra and Paula. All right, so today we're going to talk about how we're doing, how we're doing with the words that we said is going to be for the year. All right, so how you doing? How are you on your journey right now so far? And we're 4 weeks in.
Ah, yeah, I did that to you last session when I said, "How's business, Paula?" Now you're pushing it back on me. I'm doing pretty well, considering I've had some rough news here in the last couple days. Personally, that's been kind of hard. And since my words are focus and consistency, it's good to talk about, I think, like, how do I focus? I mean, I've had to do this as a performer, and so this is a place where I could even speak to it, because how do you focus and show up and do the work you need to do when you're struggling personally with, a loss or a challenge of some sort? And I've had to walk into many performance situations, coming from something that was really, really difficult for me,
Yeah.
and still show up, still give a good show, still walk in and be able to be a light, as I like to say it. And I had to do that yesterday. I had to do that yesterday. And it was really hard. It was really hard. But what I found was, once I get into the work, if I can reset. And one of the things that I did tell the clients I saw yesterday is, I said, I'm having a little bit of a rough day. I'm a little off. Just want you to know that before we start, so that it's not you. And I think that that's a piece of communication that sometimes we don't give. But I have found that people will show up with you where you are. And then I almost will always have an amazing session with that client, because it feels like we've set the scene for, this is where I'm at, but I'm here for you. We're still going to get the work done. And then you get into it and you're like, it's a great distraction, I guess you could say. Not that you want it to feel like you're distracting yourself from the things that are hard, but it does help you put it into perspective and go, there is still joy. There is still work that we can do that. Yeah, so my focus was tough yesterday, but I got through 6 clients yesterday, and it ended up being a pretty good day for the most
I
part,
love that.
considering that, and sort of in between, just trying to deal with how I was feeling. How about you?
I love that. Yeah, I think, just to kind of piggyback off of that, my word for the year is focus. And I haven't done that great of a job, partly because I've taken on a little bit too much. But what I recognize is, and this goes back to what you were just talking about, is there's something to be said for being very transparent. When we are open and honest and even vulnerable with people, it helps. Um, because we're not going to always be perfect ever. But more importantly, is letting people know kind of where we are. And it doesn't mean you have to necessarily tell people what's exactly happening, but even just sharing and just saying, I'm in a space today, or this is what happened, it helps. And I think it also shows that you're human. As best as we have to show up in our professions, no matter what it is, our jobs, careers, personal, whatever, sometimes we have the mask. We have a mask. And I think what ends up happening is we're not showing up as ourselves. I always say that's one of my issues with social media, right? Is everybody puts all the great stuff out. And the reality is people are looking at that saying, oh my gosh, their life is so great. And the reality is, no, it's not. And so for me, this month's been a little tough. And it's not tough in this horrible way for me. It's just overloaded. And so I'm a little bit overwhelmed right now. And so of all the things that I've taken on, and it's not a bad thing. It's just trying to figure out the balance. It's trying to figure out boundaries. So I've gotten a little bit tighter when it comes to my calendar and what I say yes to, and how I show up with my time. Even text messaging. There are many days now I just cannot get to all of my text messages. There was one day I had 30 something text messages by midday, and I was like, I can't look at them. And so I chose to focus on what I needed to do. So going back to my word, I'm getting far better at recognizing that you don't have to keep stopping and doing this and looking at this, but instead, what does the calendar say you're supposed to be doing right now, Paula? And so it's focus. And again, not always easy. It's not easy, but if I'm going to stick to this word and go all in this year, I have to make sure that there's something to be said for um, even when things are happening. Be transparent, tell people what's going on, and keep it moving. Because, as I always say, right, everything does begin in communication. And so I have to tell people what's going on. So, um, probably a long-winded answer, but my answer is I'm overwhelmed, but I'm still trying to be focused.
I just realized that I stole your word when I was explaining what I was doing. Focus. How do you
Focus.
focus? I probably should be more like, okay, mine were peace and consistency, right? So, but the focus one I think was important. It was kind of where I was yesterday. But
Right.
I did, however, show up for myself in that. Yesterday, I had sort of the rough news, and then I still worked out. I still did my journal. I still, sat in my safe space in my living room and had my coffee and just tried to like put myself in a good headspace, even though it wasn't necessarily easy. And I find that we talked about it a little bit last time, that that's the key for me anyway, is to be like, what can bring me, into my center? What can I do consistently every day that's going to help me stay in that place of peace so that no matter what is happening, I can still be present in the best way that I
Yeah.
can. And so that was
And,
that was how I showed up in my
yeah.
words yesterday.
Your words. And I think that's an important piece of this is figuring out what to do in those moments. I've talked a lot about with people, everything we do is a choice. Everything we do is a choice. And so how we show up is a choice. And yes, even when we have the bad moments, even when we're in a state of shock, we have a choice in how we react. And it doesn't mean it's easy, but still sticking to the things that are important to you, right? Even with bad news, and recognizing what's good for you is you still have to do those things. I'm a tea drinker and I love tea. And so that's become my thing is I just want to sit down with my cup. Right, right, right. Just want to sit down with my cup of tea. And so there's something to be said for that's what brings me a little bit of joy. I've also said, my words in this stage of life are I want joy, peace, and happiness. And if it doesn't bring me joy, peace, and happiness, I don't want it around me. And that's important to keep me sane. And that allows me to have boundaries. So when we have these moments when it's tough, when we have these moments when we get bad news, when we have these moments when it's just hard to show up, it's us figuring out what it is that we're going to choose to do and how we're going to choose to show up. And again, I'm going to keep saying it. I'm not saying it's easy. You still have a choice. Still have a choice.
And I think it's important to honor your feelings in the moment. I did have a good cry. I did, kind of process through some of it, and throughout the day, it came back. But honoring your feelings. And had I really felt yesterday like I needed to take the day off, I would have. So I just want to say that, I would have, if I felt like I couldn't be effective, if I feel like I wasn't going to be able to show up in the way I needed to for my clients, then I probably would have just said, hey, can we reschedule? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that's coming into that whole boundary and saying sometimes it's just not the right day for this.
Right.
And
Right.
and in my life, I've always, as a performer, I used to boast about the fact that I never missed a show, no matter how sick I was. But now I don't do that. If I'm that sick, I ain't doing anybody any good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
especially me. So
Yeah.
I'm just not doing it. So
Yeah.
I think we're honoring our words, by being very honest about how they show up in our lives every day, and
Yeah.
that they can sort of dismantle.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change that we're all in for 2025. We're all in on all of this.
Correct. Correct. And here's what I'll just say as we kind of wrap up here. I think that's an important piece of this is as I say a lot, life is always lifing. And so when it is, it's okay. It's okay. You can still be all in. You can still do the things that you want, but it's okay to know when you need to rest. It's okay to know when to put up your boundaries. And it's okay to know that the choice that you make in that moment is for you. And a lot of times I tell people like I don't have to necessarily explain some of my choices. I don't owe apologies or explanations. I don't. I'm choosing to put Paula first, and that's so important. I think to ultimately show up for everybody else. And so, um, until the next time, I want us to make sure that we're showing up for ourselves in the best way that we can, that is most healthy for us. That is my kind of my parting words for today. And what are yours?
Mine are just be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. And, we said last time a little bit, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, but also our culture and, the social media, we put there's just pressure coming from all sides a lot of the time.
Yeah,
And be kind to yourself
yeah,
because sometimes it's okay to say, I just can't today,
I
or
just can't.
just back off a little bit, and that's something in our ripe ages, our wisdom ages, right? That I think that we have both learned that in order to show up in the way that we want, those boundaries are important. Those boundaries are important. So, all in for
Okay.
2025.
Let's go. We'll see y'all on the next episode.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.